Well, Dr. Carson, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure.
Well, one of the things I'm interested in learning about is why you started the American Cornerstone Institute.
Well, after the first term of the Trump administration, I was going to relax. Since I failed retirement the first time, I said, I'll get it right this time. But noticing some of the policies and the direction that the country was going in, I said, I can't enjoy myself cruising around the world playing golf while the country's going on. So some very capable people from HUD joined me in formulating a think tank / do something about it. And our cornerstone principles are faith, because we saw that slipping away from our society. Liberty, which is so important for America. Community, learning how to work together, learning that we're not each other's enemies. And life, from the womb to the tomb. And that has kept us quite occupied.
All right. Well, I know one of your big initiatives is called Little Patriots, and it's a curriculum that teaches children about American history and civics, and that's something that's very close to Mountain State's Policy Center's heart, because we just launched a Civics Cup for high school students in Montana and Idaho, Wyoming, and Washington that will have them compete for their knowledge on American history. I'm just wondering why that is a pillar of the American Cornerstone Institute.
Well, knowledge of history is absolutely critical to the maintenance of our values, principles. And, one of the things that happens if you look around the world at countries that become Marxist countries is they indoctrinate the children and they distort their history. And when people don't really know their history, they lose their identity and they become very easy for manipulation. And we wanted to fight against that, because those who want to fundamentally change our nation have worked very hard to get into our school systems and into the teacher unions, and they've done a very good job. But we can't just sit by and complain about it. We have to be just as vigorous in terms of making sure that our children understand the true history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the fact of the matter is, an objective analysis will show you there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly.
I've noticed on your website that you have written extensively about school choice and about homeschooling. And that is something that is very important to Mountain State's Policy Center. And also to me personally, I'm a homeschool mom of 3. I'm just wondering, why you think it's important and what the Cornerstone Institute is doing to promote it.
Well, the reason I think it's important is because if you look at the congressional record, January 10th, 1963, Congressman Herlong of Florida read in the 45 goals of communism in America. One of them was to gain control of the schools and the teacher union so you could indoctrinate the kids. You have to start that early. It was Vladimir Lenin who said, give me your children to teach for 4 years, and the seed that I sow will never be uprooted. Well, we also have a saying, comes from the Bible. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's older, not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. We have to get in there with ours and fight with theirs. Make sure that we really are able to inculcate into our children those values that will stick with them for their entire lives.
So on a related note, I guess, given that I don't think the election results would be the same if everyone grew up in a system or environment of school choice, I'd love to know your thoughts on the election results this week in New York City, Virginia, and New Jersey. Because the Democrats just cruised to victory with very large margins. And I'm particularly interested in your views on how a socialist like Zohran Mamdani will impact New York and the Democratic Party, because it feels like he may be the new face of the party.
Well, I'm not as concerned about it as some people, because, Virginia, they say it's a purple state, but it's really a blue state. New York City is definitely a blue city. New Jersey, blue. And you had blue candidates. So it's not surprising that they won. If it had been red states, red candidates, and you'd had that outcome, then I would have said, wow.
Mhm.
But the media will, of course, try to paint it as some kind of seismic shift in what's going on in the country, and everybody better jump on this bandwagon. I don't think it's going to work, though.
Okay, well, that's I haven't heard that perspective yet. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the left has really just bulldozed through American institutions in the past 75 years, whether it's universities, the K through 12 education system,
Right.
libraries, you name it. The left has overtaken it with some notable exceptions.
Right.
And noted conservative activist and writer Christopher Rufo recently wrote in America's Cultural Revolution how the radical left conquered everything, that, quote, the opposition must devise a strategy for laying siege to institutions, severing the link between ideology and bureaucracy, and protecting the common citizen from the imposition of values from above. Do you agree with him? And if so, how do we overcome this?
Well, we had a person who was doing a very good job of that, and that was Charlie Kirk. He's sort of like the right side answer to Mamdani. And the left doesn't mind if people speak against their ideology, but they do mind if people listen. And Charlie was drawing these gigantic crowds, and there was conversions going on in all these campuses. And that's what they don't want. And the way to fight it is we've got to be out there. We've got to be very vocal, non-apologetic, but doing it in the right way. That is putting the facts on the table and saying, let's talk about the facts. Let's hear your opinion based on the facts. Let's hear my opinion based on the facts, and let's see if we can come together. Because if we don't, as a country, we're doomed. We're going to lose to China on everything. And I would not be surprised if China was not behind some of this divisiveness that's going on in our country, because they know they can't overpower us with weaponry, but you can destroy us from within. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And that's why they're driving wedges between us on everything: race, age, income, gender, politics, religion, you name it. Get us fighting each other. We'll never unify and be able to actually attack the problems that are destroying our country.
I guess two questions from that answer. It seems like Charlie Kirk, one of his superpowers was the fact that he just grabbed people in their heart first, and then secondly, their mind. Mm-hmm. And that I feel like there's a lot of people on the right who really want to grab people by their mind, but don't know how to grab people by their heart. So how do places like the Cornerstone Institute and our Mountain States Policy Center grab the whole person?
Well, that's why our very first cornerstone is faith. Because what does our Judeo-Christian ideology teach us? To love your neighbor, not to cancel your neighbor, not to hate your neighbor if they don't agree with you. And we really need to start manifesting that, because it's one of the reasons that a lot of people say, I don't believe in God because, he's going to burn people in hell forever. And they only live for 60, 70, or 80 years. That doesn't seem fair to me. Well, of course, he's not going to do that. The Bible doesn't say he's going to do that. Go back and read the original Hebrew text. When it talks about forever, it's talking about they will not come back forever. They'll be gone forever once they're gone. Because God is love. And a loving God would not take people to heaven who wouldn't be happy there and make them stay there forever. That would be very cruel. He would just say, they're gone, end of story.
So what do you say to young people who are so upset by Charlie Kirk's assassination and maybe afraid to speak out now publicly about their beliefs and probably are also feeling a little bit rudderless about what they do next without their mentor still in place?
I actually spoke about that Tuesday night at UVU, because a lot of those students were actually there. And so you have a choice of what you want to do with the thorns that come into your life. You can be angry and you can let that anger control you, or you can decide to let that anger push you toward a goal. I remember when I was in junior high school, one of the teachers, at the end of the semester, there was a big ceremony, and the best student gets a special award, and I was the best student, I was the only black student. She got up and chastised all the white kids for letting a black student be number one. And that anger said, let's show that woman that it's not about color, it's about intellect. So it really channeled me into becoming a really superior student at that time. So, or I could have just said, this turkey woman, because that's what all the other students were saying was to her.
Well, I think it's amazing that she even recognized you at the time as the best student, because she probably didn't even have to do that. It wouldn't have mattered.
Others had already made that determination, and she was just sitting on the stage and had
handing out
2 cents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's been to move on to a different topic, there's been a lot of reporting in recent years about the mass exodus from blue states like California and Illinois and New York, Maryland, to states with lower taxes, lower regulation. Just wondering what you think that, how that will impact congressional representation in coming years and elections.
Well, the blue states will become bluer and the red states will become redder. That's what's been happening over the last few years. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to work hard on the blue states and, helping everybody to recognize that the way you live in a diverse society is not my way or the highway. The way you live is, let's talk about what we agree on. You could take the most radical left wing and the most radical right wing. They agree on 80% of stuff. Let's talk about that stuff first and establish a relationship. And then we can get into the thornier issues. But you'll never solve them if you don't talk to each other.
Absolutely. Well, here's another demographic question for you. You had brought up how you really never got to retire and golf and play piano. At this moment, there's millions of people retiring who are just retired or about to retire. And as someone who hasn't retired or has accomplished quite a lot in your so-called retirement, I'm wondering if there needs to be a rethinking of that term or what it should be, and whether or not you think that people's satisfaction or desires change when they turn 65, or if they still have a need for purpose and structure.
Well, the word is not mentioned in the Bible, and the concept is not mentioned in the Bible either. So I'm not sure that it's really a valid thing. I think people just say, I've worked long enough, it's time for me to retire. But the problem is going to take care of itself, because Social Security ain't going to take care of it. We're going to run out of money for that. We're running out of money for everything unless we make some severe changes to the system. Same thing with Medicare, Medicaid, all these things. We're running out of money. And it's not going to stop unless we stop and say, wait a minute, we can't do this. We've got to have a different system. And we can do a better system. We just need to come to the conclusion that we need to do it.
Well, my last question for you. What are your top 3 concerns for America today? And how would you encourage young people to overcome those issues?
Well, hatred and division, big one. Lack of faith, moving away from our foundation. And I would say lack of education, because it's real easy to manipulate people who are not well informed. And, I never cease to be amazed when I see some of those men on the street interviews where they ask them just the simplest
most basic,
questions.
yeah.
They don't know. You could ask them who wrote Mozart's 40th Symphony, and they say, I don't know. And so someone comes along and starts promising them this and that. And oh, wow, that sounds great. And that's why Marxists always do that. Wherever they go, they promise people everything. There's not one single instance you can point to where it ever came out the way they said. But when you have people who don't know history, it doesn't matter. And then as far as the hatred and division is concerned, again, it goes back to our ability to communicate with each other. You know, it's like when two people get divorced, you know, before they got married and they're courting each other, they were talking to each other all the time. They were together all the time. They were touching each other. Just couldn't stand to be away from each other. By the time they're ready to get divorced, not a peep. And their spouses become the devil incarnate. So that's the same thing that's happening to us as a society. We get into our respective corners, only listening to the sources that agree with us and being driven further and further away from each other. And we need the kind of leadership that encourages us. Because we're called the United States of America. It's that unity that propelled us past the Nazis and the Axis forces during World War II that have led us through all kinds of turmoil and strife. But we will never make it if we're divided. And then the issue of faith. Faith to me is logic and common sense. You know, people say, how did we get here? Well, there was a big bang and everything was just organized perfectly to the point where we can predict when a comet is coming 70 years from now. And just to say, does that make any sense, really? And I've asked nuclear physicists and Nobel Prize laureates, how do you explain that? And they say, well, I know it seems unlikely, but the answer is time. You give it enough time, you have enough explosions over a long enough period of time, eventually one of them will be the perfect explosion and everything will be perfectly ordered. And I say, so you're telling me that if I blow a hurricane through a junkyard, billions and billions of time over billions and billions of years, after one of them there'll be a 747 complete and ready to fly. At which time they see how silly the argument is.
That's a good analogy.
So we just need to talk about why we have faith, the logic of it, and just ask ourselves, what kind of society do you prefer? One in which everybody is at each other's throats, trying to diminish them, or one in which we build each other up? Which one do you think will have the greatest success?
One where we build each other up. Well, thank you for your time, sir.
Absolutely. A pleasure.